very few things in warfare are static, and more often than not, a nation's ability to fight wars can matter not on production, but on their ability to adapt to change. Today, I will be going over the evolving air war and how best modern nations can adapt in order to fight for any future changes. Before we begin, I believe it is prudent to look over the past to see how the air war has changed. The air war in 2025 was very simple. Very few factions fielded air units on large scales, and air units that were encountered were often not specifically designed for air-to-air or air-to-ground engagements. On the Imperial side, the very only air units we really had mass-producible was the SC-2 Pelican. However, at the time these were not currently fielded in very large numbers due to their high individual resource costs. Factions such as the Raiders or Sovereign Navy, while able to field aircraft, often could only field one or two at a time. This meant that the air war in 2025 was not that important and was often given secondary priority to other more important factors, such as the ground forces or naval forces. This meant that large-scale air defense deployments were also not really routinely considered, and air defense was generally an afterthought, coming along with units instead of being something directly sought after. Much has changed from that point, however. In 2026, a new faction re-emerges, the Silver Wolves. They bring with them far more advanced anti-air and stronger air units. To begin with, after the fall of the Empire, the Silver Wolves began stepping up engagements in the northern frontier and are likely to engage in full-scale active warfare very shortly. Using stolen and repurposed Imperial air assets, they command a far larger and far more technologically advanced air presence than previously encountered Raider forces. Along with the numerous air assets they currently possess, their forces are augmented with significant ground-based air defense platforms. Modifications to existing weapons such as time-fused and proximity-fused ammunition loaded into cannons and guided missiles allow for conventional armored units, normally only reserved for ground combat, to attack aircraft with a high degree of effectiveness. So this raises the question, how do we achieve air superiority? A very similar question was asked to Imperial engineers in the 1940s. To this, the Imperial engineers decided a new project would be required. Any aircraft capable of operating in such a contested air environment needs to be survivable while performing its combat operations. And to achieve this, any aircraft must be required to avoid taking damage as much as possible by operating fast and being generally maneuverable, while also ensuring that pilot risk is minimized and ensuring mounted armor is thick enough to protect the pilot against expected small arms fire and flak. To answer this project, they came up with the V-14 Maverick program. Developed using resources and equipment from the scrapped V-4 Falcon project, the Maverick would be developed at the same location, Imperial Aeronautics Lab Hedgeford. The V-14 Maverick was designed around the previous iteration's turbojet engine while trying to avoid the hydraulic and avionics control problems that plagued the previous design. With the first successful test flight in 1946 showing that the design principles of creating a fast and maneuverable jet aircraft was possible, later iterations and modifications to the design would be made. This would improve the aircraft's general performance and flight control systems. Later survivabilities conducted on the completed design showed a surprisingly high resilience to damage and the ability to maintain its combat effectiveness even after damage had been sustained. However, as with most military projects, there was not without its complications and flaws. Despite numerous test pilots reporting that in early iterations pilot control could be lost while performing certain combat maneuvers at high G-forces, these objections were brushed off by the project developers. They believed that the pilots were simply making excuses for poor performance in combat maneuvers to save face. These issues would come to a head in 1947 when an aircraft would crash into residential housing block 445 while returning to the airfield after testing. While initially claimed to be caused by pilot error, a later investigation revealed that the aircraft stalled due to engine failure. This was after returning from performing a high-altitude test. The project's team were then forced by the Imperial Air Oversight Commission to fully redesign and update the aircraft to ensure that this never happened again, while also having increased oversight from them during the rest of the project completion. The delays caused by this accident and the subsequent redesigns would then lead to cost overruns, with many government officials once again demanding project cancellation, arguing that a fast fighter jet was not required due to the Imperial's existing air fleet meeting specifications. Despite these setbacks, the V-14 Maverick was eventually completed in 1949, creating the first Imperial jet aircraft. Its increased speed in comparison to existing platforms meant that it was far more combat effective. However, this did not come without consequence, as the jet engine was not powerful enough to support existing weapon loads, meaning that weapons had to be reduced in comparison to the existing platform, lowering its overall availability for dealing damage. However, with most military products, this also came with unintended consequences. Normally, these unintended consequences are incredibly negative, but sometimes positive results can be found. While originally designed as a combat air interceptor and air superiority fighter, usage reports from ground troops collaborated with pilot reports showed a surprising trend emerging. Due to the general overall rarity of Imperial aircraft and the normal risk they would pose to ground target, hostile forces would often more than not target aircraft than would be reasonably sound for them to do so. This behavioral trend was coined as airbait. What is airbait, you may be asking? Airbait is a military strategy wherein an armed force uses an aircraft to attempt to cause hostile forces to engage. This causes them to reveal their position while also wasting ammunition engaging a target, while conventional armed forces and ground forces eliminate them. Airbait was a particularly effective strategy for the V-14 Maverick. Due to its fast speed and high armor level, plus its ability to sustain damage while keep operating, pilots found they could avoid damage from enemy attacks far often than other aircraft, and in the event they were hit, could still perform combat operations. While this strategy may have been effective in the past, how is it useful today? Despite being an old strategy, current Imperial tactician managers believe that airbait still remains an effective strategy. The same factors that led to its emergence still remain prevalent, such as the rarity of Imperial aircraft and the maneuverability of the V-14 Maverick, allowing it to avoid damage, in comparison to the existing anti-aircraft methods. A large number of current Silverwolf combat vehicles and man-portable launchers allow for the loading of anti-aircraft munition. However, for the loading of anti-aircraft munitions, it necessitates the unloading of anti-vehicle munitions, meaning that if a Silverwolf wishes to engage in anti-aircraft fire, they have to remove the anti-vehicle munitions from their launchers. This therefore means they lack a very specific anti-vehicle capability, leaving them very vulnerable to friendly vehicle counterattacks while engaging in anti-aircraft. So, you may be asking, why specifically the V-14 Maverick? In comparison to other aircraft we have, why do we need to use the V-14? Remaining Imperial forces maintain a very small aircraft fleet. Out of the limited options available, the V-14 Maverick remains the most survivable aircraft, even despite its age. While other aircraft are more numerous due to the ability of them to be constructed locally, such as the SC-2 Pelican, they lack the overall general survivability of the V-14 Maverick. Alongside this, the aircraft's advanced age comes with a unique advantage. Due to its construction, it does not require refined metals or steel for repairs. This is completely separate to other such airbait options, such as the Pelican, which does require steel. While its new purpose is acting as a designated airbait unit, the V-14 Maverick still maintains its intended role of being an air superiority fighter. With recent changes to the aircraft, replacing its primary air-to-air machine guns for air-to-air missiles, and then later adding two 50 caliber Gatling guns for ground attack, it allows it to maintain its role as a survivable air superiority fighter while giving it a very strong ground attack and air attack role, allowing it to be a true survivable multi-role fighter. With the V-14 Maverick being the most survivable airbait option, while also maintaining the cheap repair costs, it is the clear option in suitability for the airbait role. Therefore, it should be expected by all Imperial Armed Forces to develop the aircraft as far as possible at its current point by training pilots on further combat procedures and allowing them even more survivability. This is known in the Imperial unit leveling system as R9ing a unit. As expected from this channel, however, we need to also talk about the defense economics side. Looking at the cumulative healing time between the V-14 Maverick and the SC-2 Pelican based on number lost, you may notice that the SC-2 Pelican takes statistically lower time to heal than the V-14 Maverick. However, this is failing to account for one key detail: the fact that the V-14 Maverick is expected to be far more survivable in comparison to the SC-2 Pelican. When adjusted by the loss rate, the healing time based on the number of battles for the Maverick versus the Pelican, the Maverick takes significantly less time to heal, as you will be expected to lose less aircraft. But more important than just time to heal is the cost to heal. Because of the Maverick's far higher survivability, it therefore leads to it costing far less to heal in comparison to the Pelican, despite the Pelican maintaining an individual smaller healing cost. And this also applies to other resources required for the airplanes, including oil and iron. While the V-14 Maverick only requires unrefined iron in order to repair, the SC-2 Pelican requires the necessary conversion of that iron into steel, far causing cost blowouts for repair. And the far lower loss rate of the Maverick means that the Pelican still requires far more oil in order to repair it as well. As I have said, the clear best option for allowing Imperial forces to maintain its current combat capabilities and victory in the air war is the V-14 Maverick. It is therefore advisable for all Imperial armed forces to develop their V-14s as far as possible, as it provides the simple best option for the airbait task. This is very much required in the modern day due to the increased amount of air threats generally expected to be encountered. And before we close out, quick channel update. I would like to thank all my supporters who voted for today's topic, specifically Jordan, who came up with these ideas. For next week's topic, it will be the correct pronunciation of boy for all my non-English speaking viewers. For those of you unaware, the Silver Wolves are expected to attack the northern frontier very shortly. If you are in any region with expected conflicts, stay safe. Remember that Silver Wolf Trunks are scary, and I will see you all next week.